In this video, we're going to learn how to make a fully functioning revolving globe from our day 23 globe from 100 days of fusion. By now, you should have copied over your day 23 globe into your assembly folder. So, how to begin? If we take a look at this globe, there's actually two main things wrong with it to make it fully function. The first thing wrong with it is that it is just one body. So we need to fix that. The second thing is the decal that we're using, if you have a decal. The way the decal was done, it looks really good at first glance, but if you flip it around to the back, you'll notice that it isn't that aesthetically pleasing, and if this revolved, it wouldn't look that great. And so if you have a decal, go ahead and delete it, and if not, let's learn how to put one on together. But before we put the decal on, the first thing we need to address is the bodies. We need to turn this into two separate components. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, we need to split this system into two bodies. So let's go to Modify and go to Split Body. I'm going to select either Body 2 or the entire thing, which is Body 2. And I'm going to use this inner circle here as my splitting tool. So I'll select Splitting Tool, and then I'll find that inner circle there and select that to use as my tool to split these two into separate bodies, and hit OK. And so now I have two separate bodies. I can turn one off and look at the other if I want to. And if you look, I don't like that this is actually part of my sphere body. I would rather that this little cylinder piece here be part of this base body. So how do I do that? Well, one trick that I could do is I can actually go back to when I made that revolution and turn it into a separate body. So let's find the revolution that highlights that feature in your design history and right click on it and go to Edit and change it from a join into a new body and hit OK. And that should give you a third body to work with. Now I said I wanted this to be part of the base body. So if I highlight it, you'll see that this is its own body. If I highlight this, you'll see the sphere is its own body. And then if I highlight this, you'll see that the base is its own body. I want to combine this center rod and the base into one body as well. So let's go to Modify and let's go to Combine. I want to combine this rod and the base into one body and hit OK. Okay, so now I have two bodies. But if you try to click on these things, nothing will happen. That's because they're just bodies. To make these movable parts, you have to turn them into two separate components, which makes them separate parts in the eyes of fusion. So how do we do that? Well, there's a couple ways, but let's go to Create. Let's just click New Component. And then I'm going to select From Bodies, and I'm going to select both of my new bodies and hit OK. And so now, if you notice, these are two separate components. I can even drag them around. I'm going to click Revert here at the top right to bring it back. And I actually want to take a second to name these two. So this component here I can tell is my globe, and so I'm going to click here and type in globe to soothe my OCD. And then I will select the other one and call it my base. Now, you'll notice that there's actually no hole for the rod. So how would this obey the laws of physics? Well, what I can do is actually cut out a hole where that rod is in this component. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go find that rod again. I'm going to go find that revolution, and I'm going to find the sketch right before it in my design history that the revolution is based on. And I'm going to open up my sketches. And when I click on this and when I have sketches open, it actually highlights the sketch that it used to make it. I'm going to make that sketch visible again by selecting this eye, and you can see that I now have the sketch here visible. Let me also make my base invisible. And so now I'm only looking at my globe and my sketch. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm actually going to reuse this sketch a second time to make a second revolution. So let's go to Revolve, and I want to select this profile, and I'm going to tell it to revolve around that same center axis as before. I'm going to make sure that it says 360 degrees all the way around, and make sure it says one-sided. And yours probably already did, and hit OK. And so what did that do? Well, that cut a hole out of our globe here in the exact same place as that rod went. So I can go ahead and turn this sketch off and turn my base back on, and you'll notice that there is a hole in the exact same place where the rod goes. I'm going to go ahead and hit revert to bring it back to where it's supposed to be. And so why is that so important? Because now I have two separate components that should, by all means, obey the laws of physics. Okay, great. So I have two separate components. So I'm on my way to making this a fully functioning globe. But what about fixing that decal problem? If you notice on this globe, if I animate the model, it is a fully functioning globe. It actually has all of the continents on it. Both sides look very good. How do we make that happen? Well, the way I made that happen is I actually have one face ever so slightly bigger than the other face. I made a revolution where one side of the sphere is slightly bigger than the other side. And so how can we do that? Well, I'm going to find the work plane that we used earlier that had that sort of diagonal work plane that we utilized before. It will be under construction. If I click on this just like before in our sketches, I'm going to go ahead and close sketches, by the way. If I click on this just like before and when we did sketches, it'll actually highlight the work plane that it represents. I want to start a sketch on that plane. So let's go to New Sketch on the plane that diagonal plane is actually on. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Slice so I can see the inside. And what I want to do is I want to draw a circle that is slightly bigger than this circle. So I'm just going to click and drag and draw a circle. Right click and hit OK. And I'm going to drag it around. Now be very careful not to snap it to any lines or any edges. It will want to. Try not to let it. If you do, it might get stuck. And you might not be able to get it off that line until you hit Control Z. But go ahead and put this circle in about the center. It's not going to be perfect, and that is okay. And then I want you to size the circle so that it's only slightly bigger. Now, if you notice, mine is bigger on the bottom than it is on the top. So, okay, I just need to bring it up a little bit, right? So we just drag it up until it looks like it's offset in all directions the same amount. So maybe zoom in a little bit and drag it around. And then I can offset it again. I bring it in a little bit. And I want it to be just slightly bigger on top, on the right, and on bottom. And I want to make sure that it's always bigger at every point. So for example, what I don't want is it to be bigger. Let's see here. I don't want it to be bigger on top, but smaller on bottom. So let me just undo that because I was actually about where I wanted it to be. So I can just drag it in a little bit. And I just want it to be slightly bigger than the globe itself. And once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and grab my line tool. I'm going to find my center point and drag it to the top of my circle. I want to make sure that it has a vertical constraint, so I'm going to go ahead and click my vertical constraint, click on that line that I selected to make sure that it's completely, perfectly vertical. And then I want to do the same thing. I want to draw another line from the center to make sure you actually hit the center. I can tell that I actually accidentally missed the center there. So let me click off and grab my line tool. I accidentally clicked this edge. Make sure you click that center dot and drag it down to the bottom as well and snap it to this circle here. And again, make sure that you add a vertical constraint to make sure that that line is fully vertical. So now I have a line that goes from top to bottom that is completely vertical and goes through the center of my circle. I don't need half of this circle though, so I'm going to go find my trim tool under modify, and I'm going to trim off the left side. And so now what should we have left? We should have half a circle with the line going down the middle, and I'm going to finish my sketch. And if it's too big, I can go back into the sketch. I'm looking at it now. It does look like it is just a tad bit too big. So if I go back in and I slice it, I can drag it to make it a little bit smaller. That looks much, much better. And I want to make sure that I didn't make it smaller than the globe itself, either in the top, the bottom, or the right side. And I'll hit Finish Sketch. And so now that I have this slightly bigger circle, I'm going to revolve it. So let's go find our Revolve tool. And actually, I'm going to turn off the base so it's out of my way and so that I'm only looking at the globe. And I'm going to select this profile. And then I'm going to select that center axis. So I'll zoom in until I find it. And you'll notice that it wants to cut away the entire thing. I'm going to change this from a cut to a join. And I'm going to change it from 360 degrees to 90 degrees. And I'm going to change it from one side to symmetric. And what does that do? Well, if I play with this for a second, you can kind of see what's happening. It's actually making it bigger. How much bigger? Well, 90 degrees bigger if I type that in. 90 degrees both directions in a symmetrical way. So from this point, from the sketch, it's going to revolve 90 degrees this way and 90 degrees the other way. And so to you, all it will look like is just a small line in the middle of your shape. But if you look super closely and zoom in, you'll see that there is a second face there. And if that face is too big for you, that's fine. Go back into your sketch and make this slightly smaller until you're happy with it. And so why is this so important? Well, because now we have two faces to work with, so we can put a decal on each side to get the entire globe. Before I do that, you might notice that we actually lost part of our hole that represented the center of our shape where the rod went through. And so how can we get that back? Well, we did it before we did this revolution. So what I can do is I can select that revolution and drag it after. So you can actually move parts of your design history around. So I'm going to find that revolution that represented my hole. I'm going to drag it to the very end of my design history. And so now I have that fully cut out circular hole, once again, going through the middle of my shape. So if I turn the base back on, you can see the hole is fully there. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back off. And so with that there, let's go ahead and add our decals. So I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Decal, and I'm going to go Insert from my computer, and I'm going to find my Eastern Hemisphere first. I'll just start with that one and hit Open. And I'm going to select this face on the right, because why not? And I'm going to use this hole here to rotate this to try and get the north at the same direction as that hole at the top. And so I want to make sure that if I look at that hole, okay, I want to make sure that the northernmost part of this globe is at the top, or is aligned with the top. If I click on this square, I can drag it around until it's centered where I want it. And if I drag this corner here, I can make it bigger or smaller. I recommend you only focus on this, and this rotation. So this square moves it around, this rotates it both ways, and this makes it bigger and smaller. So once you get it centered and pointing the direction you want it, go ahead and try to size it so that these pink edges line up with the edge that you created for yourself. And it's going to require you to play with it a little bit, so I recommend you take a second to play with it until those pink edges are perfectly aligned. And it's not going to be perfect, but once you're satisfied that it's pretty close to perfect, where the pink edge is intersecting with that line that we created, go ahead and turn off chain face so that we can only see our half of the globe. And if it's not quite perfect, keep playing with it, and then hit OK. And so now we've got half. Now what I'm going to do is go to the other side and do the exact same thing, but with my Western Hemisphere. And I will adjust it until I am satisfied that it is just right. And once you get it to about where you want it to be, make sure you turn off chain faces, and then you can kind of check to see if it looks the way you want it to. Are our north poles on both ends lining up, for example? Are our continents lining up on both ends? You'll notice that no, you can see Russia is ending here on this one and it's ending here on this one. And so how do I fix that? Well, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make sure that I rotated this the correct direction. If you notice, well, that's kind of obvious. I didn't line up my North Pole with the hole, and so you kind of just play around with it until it looks the way you want it to. So I'll keep rotating this until that lines up with the North Pole. And then if you notice, okay, maybe I need to drag it up a little bit. So I'll just keep playing with both ends. And maybe go back to the other side, hit my home button, and edit that first decal a little bit. So I can right click and go to edit feature. And keep playing with it until you're satisfied. But once you're satisfied that this looks more or less like the globe that you think it should be, go ahead and turn your base back on and let's make it revolve. And so the first thing I want to do is I actually want to ground my base. So I'm going to find my base, I'm going to right click and go to ground. And you might not be able to see it on my screen, but it is above new component and create drawings, I promise you. It should say the word ground. Select it so that this piece cannot move. And then finally, let's go to assemble. Let's go to an as-built joint. And so an as-built joint builds a joint in place. And I'm going to select both of my components. And where do I want these two components to snap in place? I want them to snap using this center circle. And so I'm going to hover over this center rod until you see that little flag going through the center of it. And once you select that rod, it's going to ask, at exactly what reference point do you want it to spin? It doesn't really matter. Just select the point that it's offering you, and you'll notice that it actually starts spinning as a globe. If I animate, you can see it's spinning on its own. I'm going to hit OK. And if I want to see it animate, I will go up here to Joints and right-click and go to Animate Model. And we have a fully functioning globe. And if you're still not happy with those decals, you can always go back and find them and edit them both until it is perfect and your OCD is soothed.